Here we are to discuss Project 2. So Project 2 is going to ask you to compose a set of clear and usable instructions on how to navigate some part of life as a UAB English major, minor, or concentrator. And you're writing to future UAB English major, minors, or concentrators. The way you're going to publish this is either on a web page, so for example, Adobe Express, which we'll be learning more about in this unit, or as a short video, a social media post, or a polished PDF. So the first step is going to be to choose a task to describe and to give instructions for. I give you a lot of things to consider as on the assignment sheet, but if you'd like to think more about it, let me give you some advice on how to choose a task for this. So you want to avoid a topic that is going to have vague kinds of directions. Something more like a blog post is something you don't want to have for this particular assignment. You also don't want to choose a task that's way too personal or way too idiosyncratic to your experience. You want to think about your audience of future English majors and think what might be applicable to many of them. So it should be something that other folks could replicate and not that's just personal to you. And it needs to have some clear steps. So some ideas are how to choose the right kinds of courses, how to potentially save money on books. Perhaps you talk a little bit about how to find a professor mentor, unless you can't find some succinct ways to say this. So if you can think of some general steps that might help folks do this, then it would be a good task to choose. But one thing maybe not to write about is how to develop a sense of identity as an English studies person. This, again, is something perhaps more blog posty, something that you want to speak more about in a more narrative type style. So after you've chosen your task, you'll need to also compose or include a visual component. So this could be a photo, an infographic, icons, something that's going to enhance the project's goals. Finally, you will publish your instructions in any of these formats. If you choose a short video, you want to make sure that your backgrounds are sharp and clear and that your transitions are good. You do not want to do a video that is not thought out. A video might be the hardest format to make professional and good looking, but it might also be the one that fits your task best. It depends on the task. So as you can see, you must have that final publishing format. You need to have a very specific element of life as an English major. You'll also need to have language and rhetorical choices that are appropriate for instructions. So you'll see from our lecture this week that there are some specific ways that you need to word instructions, and I'll show you a couple of slides available to you on the course slides that show you information from the book that summarizes this. You'll have to have that one visual component, as well as a works cited page crediting any sources, and an appendix that includes screenshots of any GenAI prompts you use to compose or to revise your work. So here is a snapshot of the rubric I'll use. Make sure that the task is relevant. Make sure that the instructions are in the appropriate kind of language, that they're organized in a good sequence, and that they have good strategy to design so that readers can understand it. You'll also have to have your visual and your sources. So this is available to you in the course slides. This gives a really nice summary checklist of how you should be thinking about language for instructions. So you are welcome to refer to this. I do talk about it in the lecture. And then you have a 2-page kind of summary of how to think about writing instructions from the planning stages through the writing, through the illustration, and then usability testing. So when it comes to usability testing, we will not be able to engage in this in the way that I would love to. When we're meeting in class as opposed to online, you're able to get your peers to do the work of testing out your instructions. I did want to mention some basics about usability testing here and then give you an idea of how you will be doing peer review, which will have a usability testing component. So there are lots of different ways that people can go about testing usability for instructions or for interfaces such as websites and functions of websites that many different companies need to test out. So, one is a read and locate test where you give your users a certain series of things they need to find within your interface, usually an online system. And that helps you check for easy navigation and format. There's another one called user edit, and there are lots of different ways you can do a user edit. But this one is one that I really like and that we would do in class if we were together. And it's where the folks who have written the instructions or created the interface watch the participants actually perform the task while using the instructions, and that helps them learn about where there might be problems with their instructions. And you can also use the protocol method, which works well with the read and locate or the user edit. And this is where the people who are actually following the instructions or using the interface speak aloud as they read and respond to instructional tasks. And this gives the folks who are testing the instructions good information about what's going on in the heads of the users and where they might have missed a step or two or done something confusing. There are also ways that you can give folks a comprehension test after they've interacted with a set of instructions or an interface. You can also do surveys and interviews about people's experience using something you've designed. And if we were in class, we would be doing a combination of the user edit and the protocol method, where you, the writer of the instructions, would watch a peer actually go through the process of performing the task, and they would be speaking aloud so that you could take some notes. So the user edit would ideally have at least 5 participants. And there are 2 major ones. And one, again, is that think aloud model where the user is speaking what they experience. So the participant receives the instructions and a product or whatever the items might be. The participant works through the task and then they talk aloud while performing it, giving feedback about what's happening in their minds. So if you were engaging in this kind of usability testing, you would need to either record the session or take extensive notes. And you also want to have a kind of post-test to really understand. You have to analyze what happened and go in and fill in the gaps of where you think there might be problems so that you could revise and edit your interface or your instructions. But for this particular project, there's not going to be much interaction and you won't be in real time with someone. So we're going to do the marked up pages model. And this is one where the participant receives a hard copy of the instructions as well as the product or whatever the items might be. And the participant performs tasks. But while they do so, they start noting down where there might be some confusion. They write on the actual document anytime that there's something missing or confusing or ambiguous, and they leave comment about the graphics and the design and the orders of the operations. So it might be that a participant marks whenever there seems to be a missing step or when there's a term that they find confusing. Maybe they write where it would be helpful to have some examples, or they take away information that they think is already in there. They would also find different spaces where there's a mismatch between what you are supposed to see based on the instructions and what you actually notice when you're using either software or when you're going through the act of performing a task. So these are just some ways to get started thinking about Project 2. Please feel free to reach out if you need any help thinking of a task or any part of the project itself.